Order, please. We'll call the meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts to order. Just one reminder to everyone in attendance before we begin to please place your phones on silent or vibrate. So we'll begin with introductions. I will ask the committee members to introduce themselves first, starting with Ms. LeBlanc.
Good morning. I'm Susan LeBlanc, the MLA for Dartmouth North.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Roberts, the MLA for Halifax Needham.
Good morning. I'm Tim Hallman, MLA for Dartmouth East.
Good morning. Suzanne Lonas-Croft, MLA Lunenburg and Vice Chair.
Good morning. Bill Horn, MLA for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Ben Jessam, Hammonds Plains, Lucasville. Morning.
Good morning. Brendan McGuire, Halifax Atlantic.
Good morning and welcome. Rafa Di Costanzo, MLA for Clayton Park West.
Thank you. On today's agenda, we have officials from the Department of Lands and Forestry and Nova Scotia Lands with us to discuss contaminated sites from the October 2019 report of the Auditor General. So we'll begin and we'll ask the witnesses if they can introduce themselves first, please.
Remi MacDonell, Director of Financial Services.
Julie Towers, Deputy Minister at Lands and Forestry.
Peter Geddes, I'm the Executive Director of Policy and Planning at Lands and Forestry.
Donnie Burke, I'm the Executive Director of Environmental Analysis and Remediation for Nova Scotia Lands.
Also in attendance this morning, we have Ledge Council with us. We have representatives from the Office of the Auditor General and the representatives from the Clerk's Office. So we'll begin, we'll ask the witnesses to make their opening remarks. Ms. Towers.
Thank you to the committee for this opportunity to talk about an important investment we're making in our provincial public lands. So you've met the other members that are here. We've tried to bring a range of folks to help answer the questions. So as you know, contaminated sites, it's a very long-standing issue. Whether it's on public land or not. It goes back, in many cases, hundreds of years. Certainly, the issue that we can talk about quite a bit today, for example, on Crown land, some of them are mines that go back into the 18th century and 19th century. So it's a historical issue. We know of 69 abandoned mine sites on Crown land that may be contaminated. They all have unique circumstances, and we'll talk about that today. There is a case by case, you have to evaluate sites. So as part of our department's mandate is the administration of Crown land. It's to ensure not only good uses in the present, but that it's maintained for future generations. So government has taken the first steps to address sites that potentially are contaminated in a very systematic and comprehensive way. We can speak about work that has happened in the past, but this is about our systematic approach we're taking on. So last year, government set aside $48 million to clean up 2 of the sites that we know that needed work, and we can speak about the details of those. One out at Montague Mines here in the HRM, and the other at Goldenville, which is down in the Guysborough area. Excuse me, just coming off a cold. So these sites in particular were chosen as the initial 2 that we would tackle, and that's for a combination of reasons. It's certainly their size, in some cases known contamination levels, because there had been past mining on those sites, so there's a certain amount you can predict, but there'd also been sampling by researchers. The other thing you very much will talk about is proximity to communities, because you're looking at environmental health and public health. So the province commissioned in-depth assessments. That gives us a much deeper understanding of the sites and what the potential estimate of costs. So once the costs are known, they are booked appropriately through Finance and Treasury Board as future financial liabilities. And there's detailed policy on how you go about doing that. Notification was also provided to the Department of Environment, of course, because it's the Environment Act and the Contaminated Sites regulations that come into play. If anyone wants to see the details, this is where our partners at Nova Scotia Lands are critical. There are cost estimates and how they're developed and the reports that are available. They're posted online by Nova Scotia Lands. They show all the data and analysis that's required to assess sites and come to cost estimates. Okay? So working with our partners, it's two particular areas. Certainly how we clean up those first two sites at Montague and Goldenville, but to assess the other sites of which we're aware where there may be contamination. So $48 million is certainly a significant investment. It'll take time to work through those sites, but these are the steps that need to be taken. Very detailed and well thought out and planned well and executed well. So we certainly have a plan to address the remainder of the sites. So it's not only the staff at Lands and Forestry, but it's interdepartmental work. Certainly Nova Scotia Lands, but also Environment, Energy and Mines, Finance and Treasury Board, and Health and Wellness are all involved. So there is an interdepartmental group, and they work on that systematic risk-based approach in terms of how we will address these contaminated sites. So it's to ensure that the remediation of any risks is done in a strategic and thorough manner, addressing the greatest risk to both environment and human health first. So each site will have its unique circumstances, and there can be a variety of levels of action and remediation with any contaminated sites, but specifically the ones we're talking about today that we're dealing with through the department. Some may require a little action, some may require a lot of action, and some may not even require action, and we can speak to those examples. But it's very important that we do that careful evaluation. We want to provide an accurate picture of what needs to be done so that all Nova Scotians are aware. And if there are risks and if there are costs, that it's very well informed by science. As well, just Nova Scotia Lands has a broader mandate. So they act as an agency for the government around remediation of contaminated sites more broadly, not just on Crown land. It may be other lands. So we're here as in essence so that we have that range of experience here in terms of financial, environmental, and remediation. So ideally we can answer all your questions today or gather the information for you. So we'll now be pleased to answer any questions. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start the first round with 20 minutes for each caucus, beginning with the PC caucus. Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the ongoing work you do on behalf of Nova Scotians. It's very important work. I do want to certainly recognize the historical context of remediation of mines, recognizing, of course, that this is a long-standing issue that's now about to get some work going on this. And certainly I know how all of you within the departments take this as important. But certainly I want to start off by asking what the Auditor General asked in the report, which was why did the Department of Lands and Forestry over the years not have a detailed plan in place to conduct environmental assessments of abandoned mine sites?
Ms. Tellers.
So I can start and others can add as needed on any of these questions. So it's really important to understand that in any department where there is a land ownership, there is a responsibility to understand the condition of the land. So if there is potential contamination. So I want people to be aware that there really for decades, even before the contaminated sites regulations came into place. Remember, the Environment Act has been in place since the mid-90s, and it already had provisions for addressing contaminated sites, whether it was a domestic oil spill or a larger. So we had sites, for example, that came from historic spills, everything from ships, you name it. So there has been work going on. What we're seeing now is this is our first opportunity where we've tackled it in a very thorough way. We have dealt with sites over the years as we have known about them. And so we do have those examples for you if you'd like to discuss those. So it's not that there was not work going on. It was dealing with individual sites if we became known of them. What we've done now is with those abandoned mine sites where as we start to be able to predict that there may be contamination, rather than do them just a site by site, look at them as a whole and come up with an overall plan. Okay?
Mr. Hum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so if I've understood you correctly, in the past, we would take this on a case-by-case basis. However, moving forward, there will be a more comprehensive, holistic, strategic plan to remediate these sites, which I believe, obviously, most Nova Scotians are absolutely in favor of. No doubt there's other jurisdictions that are taking a comprehensive strategic approach to remediation. Is the department looking at a jurisdictional scan of what other provinces may be doing with respect to remediation?
Ms. Towers.
So what I'll do is, this is why I bring experts. So I'll turn to Peter first and then Donnie to speak to those points.
Mr. Geddes.
Sure, I can provide some information at a high level. When we were developing our plan that we've recently put together, one of the first things we did was look at what other jurisdictions had done across Canada around this issue. I will say that we're not alone in this issue. Every province in the country has issues with abandoned mine sites because many of these operations predate modern environmental regulations. So what we see is that virtually every province has done some work, but there's really nobody that's significantly farther ahead than we are. What most jurisdictions are doing are they're accounting for the liabilities associated with these sites at this point in time. Some provinces like Quebec and Ontario have much higher number of sites and much more higher liability than we do. But everybody is now really starting to turn their attention to it more in recent years. So I wouldn't say there's any one jurisdiction that we see that's way out ahead.
Mr. Burke.
I echo Peter's thoughts in the sense that I guess, in planning the remediation, and that's what our role is to plan it in terms of how to address it. So we've looked to other jurisdictions on what they've done, technologies they've used, best practices. British Columbia seems to be doing a little bit, better in terms of the planning stage, but the active remediation really hasn't started yet. So we're kind of on par with them, and that's constantly what we do. Even with when we start to prioritize, we've looked to other jurisdictions in terms of how they prioritize their sites and what they're actually how they plan them for assessment and the final step of remediation.
Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what are some of the best practices you're seeing when you do that jurisdictional scan of other provinces? When you say best practices, could you outline maybe 2 or 3 examples of what best practices are when it comes to this?
Mr. Burke.
Sure. The assessment is probably the biggest part. How you actually assess. So CCME provides guidelines for assessing contaminated sites in Canada. It's a recommended best practice. However, when we looked at them, they're not applicable to all mine sites. They're general sites. So if you look at a gas station compared to a mine site in terms of its breadth of area that it covers, the different types of contaminants, you're mainly dealing with your arsenics and possibly mercury as a contaminant concern. So looking to those, what we're trying to do is use the information that others have used to develop the assessment tool to properly assess these sites and prioritize them for government.
Mr. Hellman.
And what's the timeline for the development of that assessment tool? I get the sense, obviously, that is critical. Once that's developed, then you can really get going. Could you comment on the associated timeline with that assessment tool?
Ms. Towers, sorry.
There it goes. So we're working through the assessment on the sites. And I also wanted to remember to say, just because the terminology sometimes can get confusing, there's environmental assessments, which are done, which are assessments of projects, like planning assessments, and there's environmental site assessments. You'll hear us use the term. That's what's typically used when you're assessing a site around contamination. So 2 different terms. As far as the timing for working through that, I'll turn it over to Peter to speak about our proposals.
Mr. Geddes.
Yeah, so we the stage we're at now is we have 69 sites that have been identified, range of mine types in the province. We're developing what we call a risk matrix process, where we look at each of these sites and kind of run them through a range of factors we'd want to consider in terms of what would make them a high risk for a range of reasons: ecological, human health, environmental. And as we go through that process, what we would do is come up with a risk ranking for each of those sites, which would help us decide which ones will be the ones that we'll need to focus on first to do on-site assessments. So in terms of the timing of that, we are at the stages of still developing the risk matrix. We recently got some feedback from the medical officer of health of some factors that they wanted us to consider in terms of how we rank these sites. So we're very close to finalizing that. I think our plan is that we would have all the sites ranked within this fiscal year.
Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, it sounds like there's a lot of departments involved in the development of the plan moving forward, whether it's finance and treasury, energy and mines, lands and forests, health and wellness. You know, with respect to the risk matrix process, am I correct in saying that there's a lot of different departments involved in the development of that process, of that risk matrix process?
Mr. Geddes.
Yeah, and I just wanted to correct my last point. I meant to say calendar year, not fiscal year, in terms of when that was done. So in terms of the other departments that are involved, one of the things we decided early on when we started to undertake this exercise was we needed to have input from a range of departments, obviously. So we've involved environments. We formed a cross-departmental advisory committee to deal with this issue. We've invited environment to the table. We've invited the medical officer of health. Nova Scotia Lands sits there as well, and Department of Finance, and Energy and Mines as well, because Energy and Mines has the portfolio for mine development in the province and has a lot of historical data on mine sites in the province. And so the goal of that committee is really, as we develop this plan, to give us input in terms of the strategy. For example, environment would give us guidance in terms of ecological risks that are associated with sites, but also how to ensure we're following the regulations as we move forward with this. Medical officer of health, of course, public health interests as we move forward. And obviously, Nova Scotia Lands is giving us advice because they're the project manager for us in terms of how the project will be managed over time, and finance, of course, because as these sites progress, we're going to have to account for them. So we've got a range of folks that are at the table that are providing us advice to make sure we kind of keep things on track and moving forward.
Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with so many moving parts, with so many departments working on this, is there a specific individual or designated department that's designated to coordinate all of these meetings and so forth? I ask because, as you know, nothing frustrates residents more when you don't know who's responsible for what and so forth. So if perhaps you could clarify sort of who's leading the charge on this.
Ms. Towers.
There's a reason I'm sitting here. Lands and Forestry has been directed to be the lead department around looking at the potential contamination on abandoned mine sites specifically. And so we're leading that interdepartmental group. Peter is the lucky executive director because I've looked to him to bring his expertise because he worked in environment for many years, as well as working at Lands and Forestry to be the chair for that group.
Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your response. With respect to the federal government, my understanding is they have a strategy for remediation of mines. To what extent will you be working with the federal government to develop these policies? What meetings have taken place? Could you outline the work that's being done vis-a-vis the province and the federal government?
Ms. Towers.
So I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Donnie Burke to add to it. So you have to remember that under the Environment Act and Contaminated Site Regulation, the responsibility rests with the landowner Hence, Lands of Forestry, as the owner of Crown Lands, has a responsibility. There can be sites where we're cooperating, and I'm sure Donnie can provide examples, where the federal government may be involved, whether it's technical expertise is a common one, but also in some cases, if there's a jurisdiction overlap for some reason, this particularly becomes an issue, as you can imagine, when you're dealing with coastal or marine environments. So Sydney Tar Ponds would have been an example of that. That was a split jurisdiction. So both levels of government were involved in that. So I'll turn it over to Donnie to give some examples.
Mr. Burke.
I guess, as Deputy Towers said, Sydney Tar Ponds is a prime example of a federal-provincial agreement, but we do rely heavily on the guidance documents from CCME and other federal departments. Edwards Pond would be one that shows up on our list as an example, where actually PWGSC went in on behalf of the Government of Canada, and it was tied to the cleanup of the Princess Mine site, so there has been remediation done on that site. So that's one of the sites that may be a quick pick for us as coming off, because there is a certificate of remediation from their consultants, and signed off by Nova Scotia Environment. Primarily what we deal with in terms of the remediation, our regulator is Nova Scotia Environment on most of these sites. There are a couple of sites where we may have interaction with federal departments because we'll be in potentially coastline areas. So you're into the Federal Fisheries Act, and but we haven't come across that as of yet, but that's kind of, I guess, where we provide that technical ability to navigate that process. Some of my colleagues with Nova Scotia Lands, as you're familiar, are involved with the Boat Harbour project, so we have a large federal-provincial relationship on that project. And some of our projects fall under Green Fund money as we speak, so MLA McGuire, they'll probably be asking me about Harriet's Field later on. So that's one where we actually have some federal funding involved. So what we do is once we get our ducks in a row in terms of what the assessment says and what we have, then we look to who we have to engage and who we have to involve. And that's a big part of the stakeholder engagement piece that we'd look towards in terms of how we interact with the different regulatory bodies.
Ms. Towers.
Just to add clarity for folks, because we're so used to it, we tend to use the short form. So CCME is Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. So that's where across all the provinces and territories and the Environment, Climate Change Canada work together to set environmental standards, whether it's water quality, air quality, et cetera. So you'll hear us say CCME a lot. And of course, PWGSC, Public Works and Government Services Canada, is the department that often works with us. So, okay.
Thank you for that. Mr. Hammond, with 5 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alphabet soup, right? As more information becomes available, how will the accounting estimates for the cleanup of Boat Harbour and the abandoned mine sites impact the financial position of the province?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here. Too many people there. Mr. MacDonell.
As we receive information that allows us to properly estimate the total cost of remediating a site, we'd refer to Section 16.2 of the Budgeting and Financial Management Manual, liability for contaminated sites, and we would book an accrual for the appropriate amount of money.
Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And is the province exposed to litigation from neighbours from these 63 mines, I guess because of the lack of remediation planning? Could you comment on that?
Ms. Towers?
As I'm sure you're all aware, any province is always subject to liability and litigation, but there are no cases in play around these sites. So it's there's a very detailed, and I'm not the one to give a legal opinion. It would be inappropriate here. But to be clear, there's a lot of case law around where the responsibility lies. But certainly our focus is on the public land that we administer and manage. So it's related to Crown land specifically. We could not speak to liability around other lands. Okay.
Mr. Hellman.
Has there ever been an analysis done within the department to ascertain or potentially predict that liability? Or am I correct in saying there's just ongoing conversations happening within the department to assess the potential of litigation?
Ms. Towers.
We do not assess the potential of someone wanting to bring a case against the province, but what we do is about liability, and that's where the section that's under our management manual that Remi MacDonell spoke to, it's very detailed. It's publicly available, which makes it very clear what's considered to be contaminated, what are the factors that you take into play, and so here's some simple ones for you that will help. These are the things that have to be considered for any site and in terms of determining liability. And that's financial liability, remember. So it's an environmental standard exists. First off, there has to be something it's measured against. Contamination exceeds the environmental standard, so you would need to have data to show you that. The government is directly responsible or it accepts responsibility, which can be a case where it doesn't own the land, but usually it's where it's directly responsible because it's the landowner. Fourth, it's expected that future economic benefits may be given up because the use of the land may be affected. And fifth, a reasonable amount of the estimate can be made. And that's very much what we're talking about. If you don't have detailed environmental site assessments, you can't get to what those potential assessments are.
Okay, Mr. Hellman, you have 1 minute.
Okay. So I have the honor of representing Dartmouth East, which is right beside the Montague gold mines. So certainly in the next round, I'll be having questions with respect to the Montague gold mines. But just a quick question. Is it too early to say exactly how that site may be addressed? Just quickly, if you could just briefly tell me, where are we at in terms of that assessment?
Mr. Burke.
So we've carried out the initial sampling last year and had our report and final report in July. We are out doing subsequent sampling now, looking at it is risk-based approach that we're looking to take on these sites. And in saying that, we have to look at what the levels are, what the effects are on the environment, what human health, ecological risk. So those items are being addressed as we speak. There's actually a crew, I think, sampling this week, if not this week, the next week on site. And once that evaluation is complete, we're only at a Class D estimate in terms of the estimation procedure. So, minus 20% plus 30% in that range. So what we hope to do is refine the estimate to the point that we're comfortable with what will happen. Right now, if you were to look at the report online, we're looking at just taking the worst material and building a containment cell on site and actually more or less encapsulating it so that it doesn't have the ability to migrate off-site. So it would be almost a landfill of sorts put on that site to immobilize the material from spreading to other parts of the environment.
Okay, thank you. The time for the PC caucus has expired. We went 1 minute over, so I'll give 21 minutes to the NDP. Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very kind of you. I want to just clarify. So far it seems like the conversation has been about the 69 mine sites. But as of March 31st, 2019, the province had identified 127 contaminated sites, of which I think 69 of those would be those sites, those mines. Contaminated sites, 39 were identified as sites where environmental cleanup is likely or already underway. And the province also identified an additional 63 abandoned mine sites for which no ability for remediation had been recorded, but that's what we're talking about. Can you provide us with a breakdown of, within the mines, can you provide us with a breakdown of how many are in the category of unknown, like the amount of contamination is unknown, or if there is a risk of future remediation? Do you have that data yet?
Ms. Towers?
Okay, so a couple of things. One is when you talk about the contaminated sites that the province recognizes, each department is responsible for identifying and doing an annual report of identifying any potential sites. So I can speak to the ones that I know of through our department. So of those, right now, as part of that assessment that we talked about, where they're going through the detailed risk matrix, so part of that is to do just that, to say there is data available or not available for a site. Some of them, they may have been treated at some point. So of those, I would turn it over to Peter to speak about a little bit more detail about the specific sites. Because remember, of those mine sites, it's a range of things. Some were historic gold mines, and those are the ones we know often had arsenic and mercury, which would be contaminants of concern. But there's abandoned coal mines, gypsum mines, a variety of other things like silica. So they each bring their own sort of profile. So I'll turn it over to Peter to speak some more on that, okay?
Mr. Geddes.
So of the 69 mine sites that we know of, and I believe we provided in advance that list of sites for the committee, there's only 2 of those sites for which we have detailed analysis and have been filed under the regulations under the Environment Act. That would be Goldenville and Montague. There are some other sites that have had some historic academic and other types of research done on them, but we haven't done formal assessments on any of those other 67 sites so far. So the exercise we're into right now is really to take those other 67 sites and run them through our risk matrix and see where they land in terms of priority. That would be based on proximity to residents, ground drinking water supply, all those kinds of things that would be flagged as a risk. And then we would move to the stage for those sites of actually conducting, the deputy mentioned environmental assessments. It would be environmental site assessments for those sites. There's different phases of environmental site assessments as well too, but basically on-site testing to delineate the boundaries of contamination, the extent of contamination, the types of contaminants that are there. That then helps you to decide how much remediation is required and be able to order the sites in terms of which ones need to be addressed first.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Okay, great. And then what about contamination on ground lands that aren't connected with mines? Anyone?
Ms. Towers.
So I'll start and then turn it over to Peter, and Remi can add if he needs to. Remember I said that for years we've been handling sites as we know of them. Some of you may remember the Arrow or the Kurdistan would be 2 common examples where there was material taken out and in many cases placed on Crown land. We've certainly learned a lot about the environment over decades about how we handle materials. And so they can speak about some of those. So that's when we talk about other sites, those are the ones. The province may have acquired land that, for example, used to have a gas station. So we have a mix of those sites as well. And so I'll turn it over to Peter to add to your question. Okay.
Mr. Geddes.
Yeah, so in addition to the 69 sites, the mine sites, Lands and Forestry has around, I'm going to say around 12 other Crown land sites that we track that have contamination on them, or expected levels of contamination on them. They're kind of a mix of sites. Some of them are under active use, they're leased. One of them is actually an HRM fire station property, and there is a plan by them to remediate that site. There's the Stanley Airport, a couple other sites. I don't have the exact list in front of me, but we do track them, and we have a plan to address those, and they are accounted for annually in our list as well too.
Okay, thank you. Ms. LeBlanc.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. So, the Auditor General describes significant measurement uncertainty in terms of the process of assessing the sites. What can you tell us about what can you tell us at this time about the costs of remediating the sites? And do you have a ballpark cost that you're working with?
Ms. Towers.
So I'll start. Yeah. So I'll start and then Remi can add. And this is where, again, remember, it's very clear under the accounting principles, you don't book it until you have good data to back you up to get to your estimate, which is why we have the $48 million for the 2 sites that have been sampled. So I'll turn it over to Remi.
Mr. MacDonell.
So the breakdown is Montague Mines, based on the results of the work that Donnie talked about, we have $24.5 million booked for that site, and we have $23.5 million booked for Goldenville, and that's based on the costs from the consultant. So far this year, we project to spend by March 31st about $850,000.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Great, and then I just want to make sure I understand this correctly, that by the end of the calendar year that Mr. Geddes talked about earlier, I believe he said, and just correct me if I'm wrong, that the rest of the sites will be assessed by the end of the calendar site. And so can we expect that more costs will be booked by the end of the calendar year then for, say, next year's financial statements?
Ms. Towers.
So to be clear, yes, he said that by the end of the calendar year, that's the risk matrix. So that's where the departments collectively look through to see what do we know about the sites and what do we predict to be the relative risk. And what that does is it sets up a prioritization. So, for example, Montague and Goldenville were high priorities. What are the next ones? So it's not until you go in to do the environmental site assessments, you don't then put a cost estimate against it. By the end of the calendar year, we'll have the list and say, okay, these are the ones we need to go sample next. They're the highest priority. So it'll be, you have to think of this as a centuries-old problem that's going to take years to fix, but we now have a systematic way of getting at it, so that we'll keep working away at these sites as they get identified for prioritization. And some of those sites we're expecting will probably even come off the list, but we'll be able to know which do we tackle next.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. And so would you agree that then it'll be another year, another couple of years before you would have, say, like the next 5 or 6, or is it even impossible to determine? Like, are we, I totally get it, that it's a centuries old problem that now we're trying to figure out. But any kind of ballpark, like, are we talking a 5-year plan? Any discussions around that yet?
Ms. Towers.
I wouldn't try to estimate the time until we finish getting through the prioritization, the risk assessment. So we'll know by the end of the year, we'll have a better sense, but it will take time to get it all. But it would be inappropriate without data to make assessment on how much contamination there may be, what types of remediation may be required, and then what time would it take. Because as you know, some of that remediation can be quite quick. You know, it may be months and weeks, but some of them take years. Tar ponds being an example, Bull Harbor being an example. Okay.
Ms. LeBlanc.
So this is a huge project. It sounds like it's taking a lot of, well, it's taking 5 departments and a number of people, but I'm wondering if you can talk about what staff resources have actually been committed to this giant project.
Ms. Towers.
So it's absolutely part of, because it's a priority, it's built right into our business plan, for example. So for staff, it's about shifting their priorities to be able to spend some time on this. One specific example I can give is Energy and Mines seconded or assigned a mining engineer to work directly with Nova Scotia Lands to work on the risk matrix. Again, remember we spoke about Energy Mines has a lot of that knowledge about mines and how they functioned. So we've put that dedicated resource in play, as well as the people who are doing it as part of their daily jobs.
Ms. LeBlanc.
So like 10 people, 50 people, 3 people?
Ms. Towers? Oh, Mr. Geddes, sorry.
So Mr. Burke could probably explain the amount of resources that Nova Scotia Land specifically puts into it, besides the full-time position of the mining engineer that was transferred over from Energy Mines to Nova Scotia Lands. Myself and another director in our department have it as part of our regular duties, and I chair the committee. And for the other departments, I'd say it's we call upon them, every couple months to be involved in meetings and provide feedback. And that, I think, what will change dramatically is when we hit the next step, and we have to, once we've got a list of risk ranked sites, and we take the plan to the next stage, which is we now have to do some site assessments. That's where the resource implications could change. We'll have to reevaluate it at that point in time.
Mr. Burke, would you like to comment?
In terms of our resources, we have the equivalent of 2 FTEs full-time, working on mine sites, and with probably, a half of another FTE spread amongst 3 or 4 people. We have a couple of environmental engineers, communications person, public engagement consultant. So we look at all aspects in terms of being a Crown Corp. We budget based on projects. So we're carrying the equivalent of probably 2.5 FTEs. A lot of the heavy lifting that we do specific to the assessments, and Deputy Minister Towers was correct in correcting me. I always go back to it saying assessments, but realistically we're doing a matrix in evaluating the properties based on set parameters. So to carry out these evaluations, we're on the planning side, but when we're active on the sites, we use a consulting team. So we have a consulting team on the Montague and Goldenville sites now, which is a team of 4 different consulting companies that more or less a consortium of them that are providing all the detailed assessment work for us.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I'm only asking because I feel like if it is a priority for the department and it's going to take till the end of December to get this matrix in place, and yet we know that we need to move on these things, especially given, especially places like Montague and where there's going to be housing developments and people living, or maybe people already are living near them, that obviously it's an important thing to get a handle on. So I'm curious to know and, wonder if, I guess I wish I had been present in budget estimates for this department, because I would have said, how come there's not more people? But that's fine. I appreciate that, the work that's going into it. Absolutely. So speaking of people near the identified sites, obviously people who are living near them will be worried about health and environmental impacts. And in some cases, some sites are still being used for recreational purposes. Are the communities at this point being involved and or notified as part of the process of prioritizing goes through?
Mr. Burke.
So our evaluation matrix that I spoke about actually looks at those specific avenues of how the sites are being used currently. Because of course, to set the guidelines for remediation, you have to know what it's going to end up being too, right? So you know, in terms of the end use, similar to Sydney Tarpon's with the fact that we wanted a public park there. So you set up your remediation guidelines to satisfy that requirement in the end. So what we are doing right now is using that as part of our evaluation. So we're putting, for instance, a 1 to 2 kilometer grid on a map on the center of these sites, and mapping how many homes are close to that, how many domestic water wells. So these all go in as risk factors. And of course, once we get to the evaluation matrix and start to look at moving to the assessment phase on some of them, then a public engagement process is a huge part of any remediation project. So we would be looking towards stakeholder engagement on each of the sites individually as time proceeds, so that people know and they're not afraid. There is a significant amount of notification on some of these sites. So Goldenville, for instance, is a good example. They used to have it was a drag race or a mud rally annually there, and Department of Natural Resources in the day closed that down, put signs on the site notifying that there's human health risks there. So steps have been taken where necessary to make sure that people are aware that there's a danger there. And, you know, with the exception of erecting fences, which, you know, you really don't want to get into given the breadth of these sites possibly, but letting people know. Montague would be a similar one in the sense that there was some active bike trails that that people were told, you know, not to use. So there is notification, and as you know, in the local, most recent media, HRM have posted on the Barry's Run site, which is just below, that there are human health risks associated with it. It's a property that they own. So in saying all that, we you know, public safety is the utmost importance. So of course, that's what we make sure it's addressed first.
Ms. LeBlanc, with 4 minutes left.
Yeah, great. I mean, that's great that there, you know, measures like that are being taken. I was going to ask later about, you know, like how are the sites that are identified managed in terms of fencing or protect, you know, so people are protected. But in terms of public engagement, like, you know, does that's a public meeting at a Legion Hall? Like, does it have? Is it knocking on doors? Is it letters? What does the actual engagement look like?
Mr. Burke.
Oh, so we have provided some engagement pieces now. So for instance, part of our work involved sampling in Lake Charles. So the residents of the Lake Charles area would have received notices if they were immediately there. Every site we go on, Goldenville, our consultants are given letters describing what we're doing, and with my number on the end, so they can call me directly and ask if they have any questions. So that's our first part. We do have a public engagement specialist within Nova Scotia Lands and a communications specialist. So part of what we do when we get to that next step is planning that engagement, typical to what was done in Sydney Tarpons or Boat Harbour. It could be community hall meetings. It could be, of course, there's a lot of press on it of late too, so sometimes that's a good avenue to get your message out as well. But our full intent is to get into these communities and actually provide people the opportunity to ask questions and hear the information.
Ms. LeBlanc, 2.5 minutes.
For the sites that you have looked at so far, is there anything that you can say about the potential of contamination in drinking water? Yeah.
Mr. Burke.
We have looked, actually, the assessment that we're doing, this phase of assessment, actually, we're actually installing wells. So MLA Hallman will probably hear you know, people saying there's drill rigs on these sites. That's because we're actually going out there to do that. So our initial blush, our first blush on the sites was looking at shallow groundwater, just hand-driven piezometers to sample water. But we're actually going to install some wells on these sites to refine our estimates and better understand what the dynamic is with water. We have looked, of course, Well Drillers Act or Environment Act, I guess the Well Drillers portion of the Environment Act requires that wells are sampled. And that data is posted. It's public data. So we have surveyed all that data. There doesn't appear to be an arsenic issue. Arsenic could be the main contaminant of concern on these sites where we looked at some well data. So the imminent risk isn't there. And previously, the medical officer of health back in I guess, a number of years back, the literature shows that there was some sampling done in some areas and it didn't appear to be an issue. But that's something we're going to validate and verify to refine our estimates to do the remediation.
Okay, thank you. Half a minute. Oh, Ms. LeBlanc, sorry.
I got nothing for half a minute, but I will thank you so far for this conversation. And in a second, I will turn it over to the Liberal Caucus.
Okay, thank you. The time for the NDP Caucus has expired. 21 minutes to the Liberal Caucus. Okay, Mr. Costanzo.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleague for allowing me to ask just one quick question, because I know he has a lot more than I do. As I'm listening to you, I know that this is a century-old problem and we're cleaning up land that that has been there and dirty for so many years, and we only started in the 90s to really clean up. I really want to know, what are we doing now for any new exploration and for mines, and what regulations we're putting for private companies to save some money or allocate some money for cleanup, a continuous cleanup, and if they're doing the right, if they're exploring and doing it right, then and they haven't left us with a mess for the government to clean up, then they can keep their money. But if they do leave us with money and they just go bankrupt, are we forcing them to allocate money for cleanups?
Ms. Towers.
So I'll start and Peter can add, because we've both worked in environment, we've seen this from different angles. So it's with mining, and remember there's exploration and actual mining, but what's built in, and it's modern practice around the world now, and certainly in Nova Scotia, is when there's a proposal for work, that's when we use bonds, basically. So they're designed as reclamation bonds. So I'll turn it over to Peter to give you a bit more of the details, but it's about predicting in advance. They have to have a remediation plan about how it's going to be fixed up, and there's a security against it to make sure that it can happen, okay? So I'll turn it over to
Mr. Geddes.
So I guess one important point to note is that many of these sites that we were dealing with, the list of 69, would predate any environmental regulation whatsoever, or government involvement for that matter. So I think in the industry in and of itself has changed a lot, regardless of government's regulatory requirements. So we've seen a lot of changes in practices in terms of how mining occurs. That said, we still have a regulatory regime to manage mine sites in the province. So all mines in this province are required to undergo an environmental assessment. That's the other type of environmental assessment the deputy talked about for a proposed project. So there's an environmental assessment required, as well as an industrial approval, both issued by the Department of Environment before a mine would be permitted to go ahead. There's also, as part of that process, a bond that's placed, the deputy referred to. So that's to cover liabilities associated with the site should the operation cease unexpectedly. So those bonds are actually set jointly by Department of Energy Mines, the mining group there, as well as Nova Scotia Environment. They're reviewed on a 3-year basis, so they're continually updated to make sure that they reflect the current status of the mine sites and make sure that they can cover any of those liabilities going forward.
Mr. Costanzo.
Thank you, and I'll move it back to Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a long time since I've been excited to speak about contaminated sites, but here we go. I will start by saying thank you to all of you. I've come to know most of you very well over the last few years. I feel like some of the questions being asked today, I could actually be sitting on that side because I could answer some of them myself. I can tell you that for the committee, when it comes to public consultation, there has been an immense amount of public consultation when it comes to the C&D site in Harrietsfield. We've had multiple community meetings, dozens and dozens of emails to the community leaders to keep them informed. Every step of the way, every step of the process, you've been down to the community center in Harrietsfield with, whether it's pictures or information, it's been very clear. So I want to thank you. In fact, I will be the first to say that a lot of times the community hears before I do. I hear from the community the information that is going on, and I want to thank you for that. I do have some questions about the overall process. First, I want to start by asking, how is it that we prioritize these sites? Because there are dozens, if not hundreds of sites right across Nova Scotia. And I heard you say the word matrix, but can you explain it a little bit how, when you look at the overall picture of these contaminated sites, how are you prioritizing them?
Mr. Burke.
I guess two questions there. I'll answer one that you didn't ask, but the reason why we prioritize, of course, is the fact that with a number of sites like that, we have to make sure that there's enough resources to do them, that, you know, we don't flood an industry, you know, that we're able to sustain the work, I guess, is the first of all. But the matrix evaluation starts to prioritize things based on human health effects, you know, all the different, you know, proximity to homes, proximity to wells. The reason, or the foundation that we used, actually, if you go back, I think back in your past life, the Halifax Metro Authority landfill was a project that I worked on early in my career, and a matrix was developed to evaluate where the landfill would go in HRM, because nobody wants a landfill in their backyard. It's the NIMBY syndrome, you know, the common thing for environmental, any kind of environmental projects. So in saying that, you have to make sure that you're doing things, you know, following proper practices, making sure that you're ensuring that the public is safe, that the ecosystem is stable, and, you know, that you're able to manage it. That would be the whole premise, I guess, of, you know, sustainable management or sustainable development in government. So that is why, I guess, we do the matrix, and that's why we break it down into the different components to be able to prioritize which is first, and of course, hopefully, the second phase of this evaluation matrix that we're looking at is there are sites, as the deputy alluded to, that may be able to come off the site. So Edwards Pond would have been a high-risk site that would have been on that, but we do have information and literature to say that it is now cleaned up to a standard. So that's one that can be removed from the site. So we're working through that and refining the list for Lands and Forestry to bring back.
Mr. McGuire.
While we're here, can I get a public, oh, into your elbow, I like that, good. Can I get a public update on the remediation on the C&D site in Harrietsfield?
Mr. Burke.
Sure. Normally I'll defer to the subject matter expert on that one, but I actually am, you know, the director on that project. So we are in the midst right now of actually, hopefully the end of this week or the first of next week, we'll possibly, we'll be issuing tender documents for the remediation of the Harrietsfield project. We have gone in there, removed all of the, I guess, what we term hazardous waste, and hazardous waste could be anything from light ballasts, thermostats in houses, because they potentially contain mercury. So I always caveat hazardous waste assessments on that. So any demolition, for instance, we usually do a hazard assessment and remove that material. So we have done that. There was a residual of waste left on the Harrietsfield site in the large containers that would have been on that site. There was roughly 12 containers, I think, sea cans that had material in them. So we removed all that material. We've cut up all the steel and recycled that. So part of what we do, of course, is being good stewards of the environment, make sure that we do it sustainably as well. So where we could recycle things and process things, we've done that. So now we're in the stage of issuing the tender for the remediation, or in essence on that site it'll be capping of the former landfill cell and the demolishing of the buildings on site.
Mr. McGuire.
So one of the, going through this process step by step with all of you, and to kind of quickly go back to the public consultation and the transparency on these projects, what I was most surprised about was it was yourself as the project manager and Steve MacIsaac, who's not here today, that were directly communicating with the community, which usually when you have that direct communication with the community, it's usually people that are further down on the rung. So I was very impressed with that, because the information coming to the community was actually the information that was coming from the top, and it couldn't be disputed. So I do appreciate that. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was pricing on the remediation of these sites. And there's a built-in, you and I have had this conversation, and I think we brought this up a bit. There's a built-in cushion, we'll say, on the price. and it's because, correct me if I'm wrong, so when people see, oh, there's a give or take, you said earlier, give or take 10 or 20%, you know, I think sometimes that triggers alarm bells, like why is there such a big cushion? But one of the things that I learned through this process was, for example, some of the stuff coming off the site could not be processed here in HRM or in Nova Scotia, and that could potentially have to be processed outside of province in Quebec and things like that. And then also with these historical landfill sites, and even with Harrietsfield, which is only about 30 years old, you know, talking to some of the contractors on site, when you put your bucket in the ground, sometimes you find things that you don't want to find. So can you explain why you have these built-in cushions when it comes to, and I don't know if that's the right word, but why you have this built-in percentage on all your projects, or the majority of your projects?
Mr. Burke.
Sure. There's two things in that question. What we do, I guess, on the Goldenville and Montague sites is a Class D estimate. That's a federal standard for estimation. So as you get more information, you refine your estimates down to Class C, Class B, and Class A. And that's no different than if you're building hospitals. Your initial blush is a Class D estimate based on what the need is and with footprint and things like that. And as you refine the process, of course, you zero in on what the actual cost should be. On environmental projects, there's a second thing that we usually carry, a contingency of sorts. And the contingency could be on buildings usually, and I'm speaking to my past life, but you know, you carry a 5% or 8% contingency on buildings per se. Environmental, you want to look at 10 to 15 because just as you said, you drop a bucket in the ground and you could be pulling something out that nobody knew was there, right? Because they are burying things and you don't know what was buried there. And to go specifically to Harrietsfield, what we did in there is to refine our estimates. Our contingency isn't as great on that one because of predictability. So we did electromagnetic surveys. We used all kinds of different technologies to be able to look for the smoking guns, you know, as a figure of speech, so that if there was an anomaly, hopefully we have enough information to be able to address it within the estimates. So our goal is always to be as tight as possible because senior managers and of course legislative folks like yourself want a predictive amount and a budget that we have to establish. So our goal is always to get it as tight as possible, but we do allow for some contingencies there to be able to do the work.
So, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you. So on the finance side of it, we have heard criticisms in the past, be it from other legislators or the public, on these projects when you see a dollar sign and an original dollar sign. So this project's going to cost X amount of dollars. And then we see as we get into the nuts and bolts of the project, the price, I mean, usually doesn't decrease, but it will escalate, sometimes quickly and sometimes just a little bit. So why give, just for my own understanding, why give that original price and why not wait till the end to give the final price? Do you know what I mean?
Mr. Burke. Mr. MacDonell.
Yeah. According to the management manual section that I quoted previously, we have to, once we have become aware that there's a liability and we are able to reasonably estimate it, we are required to book it in the province's financial records. So for example, in this case, with a Class D assessment, you would take the estimate that came from the consultant and you would add a reasonably big contingency to it in order to come to a reasonable amount of money to book the liability. As these estimates become Class C, Class B, or Class A, the actual cost prediction becomes more refined and therefore your contingency gets reduced because you're not into as big of an unknown area anymore. And at the end of it, when the project's complete, is really the only That's the stage where you actually know how much you spent. The whole idea is, as the estimates become more refined, that the contingency or cushion gets smaller.
Mr. McGuire.
My colleague to my left and said, just whispered this at me and said, it's the same as building a house or anything like that. You know, you start with your base price and then things happen along the way. Okay. So one of the questions that I had was, what is the relationship between between your department and Nova Scotia Lands?
Ms. Towers.
Can you explain that relationship?
I'll try not to cough on my cough drop here. So the two of us are here having cough drops, so just mind us. So think of it this way. Remember I said the responsibility under the Act rests with the landowner. So Lands and Forestry and the minister has the mandate for Crown lands. So we're the landowner. So it's our responsibility to follow through. Nova Scotia Lands is in essence the agent working for us to help do the overview and the contract environmental site assessment. So they bring their expertise to the discussions, what they can do in-house and or they contract again outside. So, but we're the landowner, so that's our role in it.
Mr. McGuire.
I think that just actually triggered me when you talked about transparency earlier. Another thing that we can lead to the transparency around this process and community engagement is the minister actually came to the community and was engaged in the community on this cleanup to hear exactly what they wanted and what they needed. The question that I have is, we have all these different historical sites that have led to contamination. Some of them have led to contamination. How did we get here? Like, how did we get to the point where we have dozens of sites that are, whether they're old gold mines or the C&D sites that we have, how did we get here?
Ms. Towers.
Maybe at 58, because I'm older than you, I could answer this question. It comes right back to what Peter was discussing, and it's a reflection of A, knowledge, and B, priorities over years. Because a lot of these, like I said, they go back a couple hundred years. There were a lot of activities that humans did that they did not think about the consequences or know about the consequences. You know, a very simple one of that is people have heard about Mad Hatters. Remember, they used to use arsenic when they made hats. People didn't know about those potential impacts, and it would have been the same with the gold mining. Like, it was considered doing business if they even knew there were potential impacts. So it really is an accumulation of a few hundred years. We've seen such a change since the 60s in terms of you know, people being more mindful of what products and chemicals get used in processing, the effluent requirements, whether it's air emissions, water emissions. I'm looking across at MLA Horn because his past work, he knows this very, very well. It's a lot of it has to do about knowledge and prioritization of society. And we've come a long way in terms of our understanding and our expectations for how we interact with the environment. And so we're really addressing that historical issue. The sites that become contaminated these days are the ones that are emergencies, a domestic oil tank ruptures, you know, because it roils out. So we deal with those, and we're very well organized through environment and through the companies that can handle those emergency spills.
Mr. McGuire, with 2 minutes left.
So Mr. Horn will actually take the second part of this and question you on with his expertise. But what I wanted to know was so we've seen these former practices lead to where we are today. So that to me means that your department and other departments like the Department of Environment and Nova Scotia Lands should be proactive and should be looking at other jurisdictions and looking at the practices that you're using now and the practices that other jurisdictions are using to ensure that we're not leaving these kind of contaminated sites and these kind of environmental disasters for our children and our children's children. What are you doing to ensure that the mistakes of the past are not being repeated?
Ms. Towers.
So I'll start. If anyone else wants to add, let me know. This speaks to, for example, the mining one that we spoke about, where not only do the projects have to be planned so that they do have built-in remediation plans before they can even be considered for approval. In other words, you start by being very clear on where you're going to end up. So whatever the project might be, it doesn't have to be a mine, it can be anything. That's built into, that's the reason we have environmental assessments as planning for projects, so that you know what the site will look like from the very start to the very end. And for example, there's a lot more common now, we have progressive reclamation. You don't have to wait till something's done operating. You can start working away at that reclamation and build that into it. And ironically, some of the mining projects now are even looking at where they can be cleaning as they go if they're operating in an area that had historical contamination. So it's another opportunity sometimes to clean up sites where it's a private sector company investing to do that, which helps generally in the province.
Thank you. The time for the Liberal caucus has expired, so we'll allow for the second round of questions 8 minutes to each caucus. We'll go back to the PC caucus. Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Burke, I just want to return to the crew that will be at the Montague site this week and some of the work that they'll be carrying out. That crew, is that part of a government department or is that a private company?
Mr. Burke.
That would be a consulting group that's reporting back up to me in Nova Scotia Land. So we have a company led by Intrinsic. They have an office here in Halifax. Wood is another one of the companies, Clone Crippenberger and Ecometrics. So that's actually who are performing the physical work in the field. And of course, we manage how they interact on the site. So for instance, we have to cross some private properties. In particular, it's mainly Nova Scotia Power's property with one of their transmission lines, and HRM Water have some property in that area. So we've already started the dialogue with them to gain access across their properties to get onto the Crown lands to be able to perform the assessments. It's just, we could go across Crown lands, but it's a lot of these are wetlands. So of course we don't want to forge through and destroy them. So we ask them for access through their properties where they have roads or whatever established.
Mr. Hellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And is soil sampling for mercury and arsenic over the Port Wallace development, is that happening?
Mr. Burke.
The majority of the soil sampling has already been done, so that would be in the report that you have in your package, I believe, there. The Port Wallace development area, the developer themselves have sampled on their own properties and made that data available to us. HRM have taken soil samples in the Barry's Run, which is the direct interface, or the property abutting their properties. We had some sediment samples in there, so we've kind of worked collectively to share information where possible. Because of course, being prudent and responsible for spending money, we didn't want to double take samples where accredited consultants and laboratories were used. So we have been sharing information between the different parties and communicating to some extent.
Mr. Hum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And will runoff water volumes flowing into Lake Charles, will that be included in the work that the crew's doing?
Mr. Burke.
So what we are looking at is the risk assessment aspect of, or the human health risk assessments. We have a draft report that will be released in the coming weeks to HRM, and we actually haven't even briefed our client. MLA McGuire asked the relationship. I guess I come from a consulting background, and I look to Peter and Deputy Towers as my client from that perspective as a Crown Corp. So our prudence would be to brief the client first and then go to the other parties. So we're in the midst of that. So we do know that disturbing the sediments may have some kind of effect. But we have, I guess, informal conversations with different parties in the sense that would this have a net negative effect or I guess the big thing is there an engineered solution to be able to allow that development? It's not within our mandate to assess right now, but personally, I guess our group has thought that there is potential for lots of engineering controls to refine that flow and make sure that things operate effectively. So,
Mr. Hallman.
Certainly, I'm sure you can appreciate that that is one of the critical concerns of the residents in that area. By disturbing that soil, it's going to have an unmitigated consequence for Lake Williams, Lake Charles, Lake Micmac, and so forth. So you talk about the mandate of the sampling. Can you just outline the mandate, the core mandate that the outcomes you want to achieve with the crew being there on site?
Mr. Burke.
So our assessments are refined to Crown lands only. We have worked with HRM on the Barry's Run area, which is public knowledge. But what the sampling they're doing now is specific to the Montague mine site on Crown lands only. So we'll be looking, I guess the mandate would be is to refine the estimate that I spoke about before, so that we can proceed to the next level of estimate. So, you're refining your numbers to make sure that we are predicting the right amount and that the remediation can be done effectively and efficiently.
Mr. Hallman with about 2.5 minutes.
And of course, as this process unfolds, questions will arise. So certainly, let's keep the channels of communication open as this process moves forward. The 4 different consulting companies, what was the criteria you used to select those 4 different consulting companies?
Mr. Burke.
So our initial, we actually worked with the TIR Environmental Services Manager to develop a criteria in order to establish an RFP to go out for this consulting service. These are the first 2 mines. We knew that there were more mine sites, and we were about to, I guess that was the initial phase. We were to look just at Montague and Goldenville, and as we started to look at them, and this would have been back in the natural resources days, the other 69 sites were brought to our attention. So our thoughts is we'd get the most, the most qualified, detailed, oriented team together to assess these sites. And that would become more or less the go-forward strategy after that. So what we tried to do is develop, engage the best team possible to ensure that we had, the best tools in the toolbox to do the initial assessment, and that would predicate, I guess, how we proceed with the other sites over time.
Mr. Hallman with 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, with respect to stakeholder engagement, for both mines that we're talking about, what does that stakeholder engagement look like? Are there town halls planned? What are the forms of communication to residents at both sites that you plan to get information out to them?
Mr. Burke.
So we're on the infancy of that, but we have had planning sessions to talk about, different ways we can engage. I go back to my experience, of course, has been with Sydney Tar Ponds and Boat Harbour as well. So Boat Harbour, we had a lot of community hall meetings. We have a lot of consultation with the First Nations community there, Pictou Landing First Nations. They're directly affected by the project. Sydney Tar Ponds, we used social media, websites. So our plan is to be, our goal has always been to be open and transparent. So no different than, the fact that we post all our reports on our website. So part of it would be through, possibly social media, could be mail-outs, but definitely town hall type sessions where we can actually get in these communities and engage with the public. A lot of times what we find on environmental projects is that you find out more from the public sometimes than you do from actually going out there and doing the sampling. You find just as much, right? So I used to joke with MLA McGuire in the sense that with Harrietsfield, they talked about, you know, to look at where, you know, things could be buried, or people. And it was the joke in the community, but at the end of the day, we truthfully listen to that, and that's the best way to find this information out.
Okay, thank you. The time for the PC caucus has expired. We'll go now to the NDP caucus. Another minute added on, so it's going to be 9 minutes to Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as part of the witness package for this committee, we received the terms of reference for the advisory group that Mr. Geddes is chairing. Can you tell me if the advisory group has actually met yet?
Who's doing it? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Geddes.
Yes, there's been one meeting so far, and we actually had met with all the members of the committee we'd been meeting with regularly anyways before the actual formality of creating the committee, but we've had one meeting so far. Second meeting is the end of this month.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. I was a little surprised that the terms of reference appears to be from just February 24, so it was just very recently that the terms of reference were set down. Can you share, I guess, you know, why it took some time after the release of the Auditor General's report in October to arrive at the terms of reference for the advisory group?
Ms. Towers.
I know it may shock people, but sometimes we're more interested in getting the work done than putting it all down on paper. So we've been working on this even prior to the Auditor General's report. So this has been going on in one form or another for a number of years. It's about formalizing some of that work and, as I said, getting to the systematic approach. So, and as Peter just said, they already were working across the departments, and we've been doing this in detail for a number of months. This was formalizing what that advisory group, to make sure they had a terms of reference. As people change departments sometimes, it's really important to document their roles and to get that in place.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. The advisory group consists of representatives from government. Has there been any consideration of partnering with other groups and sources of expertise, such as universities?
Ms. Towers.
I'll start and Peter can add. So remember we said right at the start, one of the things to be mindful of is there are some general principles around managing contaminated sites and the requirements to do so and the technologies, et cetera. But each site is a case-by-case basis. So certainly Peter can speak to some of the academic research and the interactions. But I think it's really important as we move forward and we prioritize these sites and we start tackling them and gathering more data and interacting with the communities. It's going to have to be customized as much as possible because there's no one researcher, for example, or no one expert. And you heard Donnie speak about how there's 4 different consultant companies involved. The idea is draw on the best expertise you can. So I'll turn it over to Peter to add to that.
Mr. Geddes.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, we have, outside of the advisory committee, we actually have been meeting with Dr. Linda Campbell, St. Mary's University, who's done a lot of research around some of these sites. And some of her students, I believe, gave a presentation to us as well at Nova Scotia Lands not long ago. We've had regular interaction. The department actually authorizes her access to some of these sites to maintain equipment and to do research work. So we are in the loop and very connected with some of that work. In terms of the committee, I would not rule out any possibility in the future that the committee could evolve to include academia.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. Earlier, Mr. Geddes talked about the risk ranking matrix being done for the end of the year. That isn't specifically in the terms of reference as a deliverable. So I guess I'd like to ask what the deliverables are of the group, but also I'm wondering about the transparency of this work as the analysis gets done and we know where the riskiest sites are. Will that risk matrix? I'm not sure if I'm using quite the right language, but the risk ranking of the 69 sites, will that be made available to the public, and will the ongoing work of this advisory group be available to the public if they want to follow the progress?
Ms. Towers and then Mr. Burke.
Yeah, we're going to tag team on this because there's a lot of pieces to that. You may remember I said this is identified as a priority in our departmental business plan. So automatically that will be incorporated into our accountability report, what progress has been made. So you'll see that on an ongoing basis. Because this isn't a one-year fix, as you can imagine, it'll be an ongoing. So we'll be looking for different ways to report on progress and not limit it to our business plan. It'll absolutely be there, but it'll go beyond that. And the once the sites and we have more information, absolutely we want to be able to share that. It's what form does that take? I think that's very much what the risk assessments that are underway right now and the advisory committee can help advise on. What's the best way to share this information? Like in the sense of the type of information that is not overly technical, but it's easily understandable and people have access to that. If some people may want very technical details, others do not. So we'll have to work on that. But I'll turn it over to Peter and then Donnie to add to that question.
Mr. Geddes.
Yeah, so I guess just to add on the advisory committee and the role of that committee, it is advisory in nature. It's not a project management-based committee or decision-making committee. We're very much relying on those folks to bring their specific mandate and expertise, and as we develop this project, implement this project, to give us guidance from their perspective. For example, I think I mentioned earlier that as we develop the parameters for the risk matrix, Dr. Strang provided a couple parameters he would like to see included in that. Environment has been giving us guidance on the expectations under the contaminated sites regulations for the department to follow. In fact, you'll see in the terms of reference that there's a note that environment is sort of reflected in there as having a regulatory role, and so there some of the conversation they'll have limited involvement in terms of the planning side. They don't want to be connected to the sort of planning of the overall framework, but rather just giving advice on the regulatory thing. So everybody has a slightly different role, but it is purely advisory rather than a project management type of role.
Mr. Burke.
Thanks. Just to elaborate and go back, I guess, to add to what Peter said before, our first meeting of the advisory committee, two main deliverables come out of that. Was first approval of the terms of reference, because we have members of that group in there, and of course environment clearly highlighted the fact they are a regulator. They can sit there, offer advice, but they can't provide guidance, right? So clearly within their mandate. The second deliverable that we asked everybody is we gave them a draft of our risk matrix as we saw it. Nova Scotia Lands, that's one of our deliverables for the project. So what we did is ask them to look at it from their lens. So the medical officer of health through his lens to see if there's things he should add or, enhance upon environment as well. If there was something there that, they're not providing direction, but they're providing guidance. So are we missing something here? So that's kind of what we look to in terms of the advisory committee. Our goal is to perform the assessments. We have to sit down with lands and forestry folks, Peter in particular, and decide who is actually running the matrix, because my thoughts, I guess initial thoughts, and Peter and I chat about this all the time, is it's good to get a good cross-section of people to look at it, because I could look at it strictly through an environmental lens with properties. So to have people's different perspectives on rating. So part of what the matrix does is we determine scorings per different elements, and we provide all the information. So the longest part of setting this matrix up was getting enough information so that I could even, for instance, offer to you with enough information that you should be able to provide an assessment as well. That's kind of where we want it to be, and we're almost there now. And as Peter said, our goal is to have that done by the end of the calendar year, so that we have a good cross-section of people doing the assessments, and then it's the tool we would use, I assume, and I'm only assuming here, that of course, especially if some fall off the list, then they come off the lands and forestry contaminated sites list for next year as liabilities. So all of that is publicly available once you see that. So in saying that, they may even use the evaluation matrix as their prioritization model. That's kind of what we're doing it for, to allow that to happen.
Okay, the time for the NDP caucus has expired. The final 9 minutes goes to the Liberal caucus. We'll begin with Mr. Horn.
Thank you. Just to continue on what you've been talking about, I guess there's some of the other sites that might be involved, like the site in Waverley, been a gold mining site since the late 1880s and early 1900s. Also, Montague. Besides Montague, you have the Oldham gold mines. I'm not sure if you had a chance to do any pre-studies on those areas. I do know that the Oldham site in particular was gold mining for quite many years, and then there was a spill in one of the oil companies said, and they dumped a lot of their waste down the mine of Montague or Oldham. And I don't know if you're aware of that. That happened in the 60s, I think, and that oil is still there, or waste oils. I'm just wondering if you have any comments on some of those sites. There's also Gage River mine, which is a specific mine for copper, I guess, that they had changed the river, Gage River, to be able to control water flows. Just a comment of those type of gold areas are involved in your site assessments.
Ms. Towers.
So for those sites that are already on the list, any information we already have would be part of why they're even on the list for us to look at. So remember, we said we have to do the annual reporting to identify that. So a lot of that information comes from two sources, actually. One is environment itself, because as you know, the spills or use like that should have been reported. And certainly that's the case for post-1995. The other is very much energy and mines. The mining group, which was within natural resources, certainly has a lot of that background. They have, and that's one of the reasons why we work so closely with them, because they contain a lot of the historical records on sites. Our job at Lands and Forestry is really as the landowner to gather that information from whatever the sources may be in order to tackle it and work our way through these sites. So I can't answer about those specific sites, but that's exactly the kind of information that either a group would have, and I'll ask Peter to speak to this. Either we know about it or we would want to know about it from any of the sources we can obtain it from. Okay.
Mr. Geddes.
Yeah, so some of these sites have had past study work done on them and reports filed on them. So, for example, you mentioned the Oldham site. That one of the things that doesn't appear on our matrix for that is some description of the types of contaminants that are there. It includes the oil spill that you mentioned, not an oil spill, but I think actually an intentional dumping of oil on that site. So yeah, we've got a lot of background data. A lot of this data has been gathered over the years through various sources. Some of it came from the Geoscience and Mines branch who are now at Energy and Mines. And so we're putting all that information into our matrix as we develop it anyhow. So what are the past reports that we have, things that will help us, again, rank those sites overall in terms of the priority for addressing them.
Mr. Horn.
So have you decided that gold mines were kind of the first wave of the contaminated sites to be looked at? Was there any specific reason why it ended up at gold mine sites first?
Ms. Towers?
So again, it comes to that, what did we know about the sites? The reality is gold mines absolutely pop up just because of the nature of the processing that was traditionally used. And so that, particularly arsenic and mercury, whether it was naturally occurring or brought in as part of the processing. So it's a pretty obvious, you know, have a look at those sites. And the other sites, for example, the coal sites, you know, we have a long history and knowledge about coal sites. That also is why they're on the list. The other ones, which are those mix of different types, whether it's gypsum or silica or anything else, anhydrite, it really is because we knew something specific about those sites. We had some knowledge available to us to put them on the list. Okay.
Mr. Horn.
Well, you know, now there are a lot of I guess, open pit types of gold mining in Nova Scotia right now that are approved. I'm just wondering how well you are looking at what's happening in those sites, because they want to expand them or they want to dig other areas of Nova Scotia and bring it to a site where it can be cleaned up and the gold formations are picked up.
Ms. Towers?
Maybe I've been around too long, but I was there when I was managing environmental assessment group when the Tucoy gold mine first came along. And then Peter was managing it, and now we're both indifferent. So we actually can speak about that site. And again, it comes back to the change when you get into modern mining, what the expectations are, that they have to go through an environmental assessment process. And that planning includes what are the potential issues on site or off site. And so very much whether like the historical gold mining, you know, the processes used in the modern gold mining, there are different processes. There are still certainly chemicals used, such as cyanide is currently used. But the requirements are significantly different in 2020 than they would have been in 1820. So that means not only the transport to the site, but any potential use on the site or coming off the site. So that's why you do need a very detailed, not only environmental assessment, but your industrial approval, which goes into all those details of handling and use and storage, et cetera. And why now sites that are operating, that's why we do have things such as the monitoring wells we spoke about. We don't just use those to determine what's on the site, we use that to make sure nothing's moving on a site. And those would be built into sites like that. So whether it's the main processing site or an area that's being extraction. So I'll stop there and then turn it over to Peter if there's anything I've forgotten to add to your question around, you know, the current gold mines, how they're monitored and how we avoid contamination.
Mr. Geddes.
Not too much more to add. The deputy's always right, so I'm not sure I should add much more of that. But I would say that, you know, a key part of the all mines need an environmental assessment, all mines need an industrial approval. I mentioned earlier, environmental assessment, mandatory public consultation process is part of that as well, too. So that would be something that would be very different than historic mines, is that there's an opportunity for the public to have input in terms of how mines are developed and operated over time. Lots of new technology, and obviously, you know, engineers at environments would look closely at, and their general compliance staff would look closely at those operations to make sure that they're being operated in compliance with the acts and regulations. One point, though, that might be worth mentioning as well, too, that if you take a case like the deputy mentioned, Tucoy Gold Project, which is actually the Moose River, most people know it as the Moose River Gold Mine Project, some of these newer operations actually provide opportunity to remediate old workings to contamination. And in fact, for that project, part of the environmental assessment approval included a requirement to deal with some existing contamination from the historic mines. So there are some opportunities there as well with new mining projects to address some past contamination.
Thank you. The time for the Liberal caucus has expired. So we're going to allow time for the witnesses to make any closing remarks if they so wish. Ms. Towers.
and I'll make it brief, but I'll circle back to the issue of we're addressing a historical issue that took centuries to develop, and it will take us years to address all the sites, but I'm very comfortable that we're on the right track and very proud that we have tackled over the years some of the largest sites with the most issues, such as the tar ponds and addressing Boat Harbor, and it's good that we're on the path to address the next sites that are also contaminated but not as severely, but we have a very detailed process. We're very happy to share that. Looking forward to getting these sites addressed, and I think Nova Scotians will be proud of all of us for the work that we do to get this done. Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other remarks that any witnesses would like to make? Again, thank you very much for appearing before us this morning. It was a very informative session, I'm sure, for those that had their questions, and thank you once again. So with that, before we adjourn, there's a few items of committee business that we have to look after. So the first one is correspondence, and I think everybody received the correspondence from Transportation Infrastructure Renewal. There was a request made at the January 29th meeting, and that was sent to everybody. And also, we received a letter from Mr. Hallman as a request to call the chair of the Forestry transition team for the committee. As there was no meeting at that time, members were polled to seek agreement to schedule the meeting, and unanimous agreement was not obtained, so the meeting didn't occur. Okay, so that's just simply a housekeeping item that was received and to make everybody aware. And also, another item of business, on March 4th, the subcommittee met, and we talked about the issue of the audit at that time, and a record of the decision was distributed to the members, so we will require a motion to approve that record of decision. Do we have a mover?
I have a comment.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to see that the decision at the subcommittee was to not proceed with an evaluation of the CAF this time. As I said before in previous meetings, my experience at the public accounts meeting in CCPAC meeting in Ontario last year was a really good one, and it was inspiring to know how functional public accounts committees can be, and I really think it would benefit our committee to undertake some kind of evaluation. And I in the attached letter from Speaker Murphy about the inquiry as to whether there are funds available, I feel like that, and I think I probably expressed this last time, but like that way of asking if funds are available sort of pulled the rug, it may have pulled the rug out from under the whole idea in the first place, because of course if Speaker Murphy doesn't know that this is something we're interested in, then funds aren't available because we've never asked for the funds. But he does say in the letter that if the wishes of the committee to submit a budget pressure in hopes of utilizing the service in the future, we can have that discussion. So I would make I don't know if I'm making a motion or not, but I would suggest that maybe the committee come back to this topic maybe at the next meeting after some thoughtfulness about it, and see if maybe we want to make a request of the speaker so that we can undertake some kind of evaluation. Because if we ask for him to consider the funds, it's possible that the funds will be available. Thank you.
Discussion on that, Ms. Lones-Croft.
I certainly was left that meeting thinking all three parties agreed to this, foregoing it because we felt we were close to probably having shuffles within our own caucuses and also possibility of a forthcoming election. I don't know where that came from, but that there would be a different group of people sitting here, and for $12,000, we felt that the taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook.
Thank you. Mr. Hallman?
I think that's a reasonable outline that my colleague has indicated, and I think this motion should go forward as is.
Okay, so what we're asking for is a motion to accept the record of decision from the subcommittee meeting. Do we have a mover? Mr. McGuire.
Just to clarify, is this motion to ask if we should spend $12,000?
No.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
The decision was that we don't at this point, but we left the door open because of the fact that the speaker did say in his reply that if the committee wanted to at a future date. Okay, we still don't have a mover, I don't believe. Ms. Roberts.
I move that the committee accept the record of decision from the subcommittee on agenda and procedures from March 4th.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Don't need one? Okay. You've heard the motion. All those in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion is carried. Thank you. Just one more thing, I guess, is that the next meeting, then that's going to be taking place here in the chamber on the 8th of April. From 8:30 to 9, we'll have an in-camera briefing, and from 9 to 11, we have the Nova Scotia Health Authority concerning cybersecurity and fraud risks from the October 2019 report of the Auditor General. Ms. Roberts.
Just for my benefit, because I'm emerging from these long days in the legislature, I believe that the follow-up report on the AG's findings from 2015-2016 is to be released in March. Can I just confirm that and just ask for clarification about when we're going to have a chance to examine that report?
The March 24th is the follow-up report from the AG. Kim, Ms. Langell.
Yeah, so I have from the Auditor General that their follow-up report will be coming down on the 24th, and we have them scheduled to come in on May 13th. That's the next available meeting date.
Okay. So again, our next meeting then will be on the 8th of April, and it's the Health Authority concerning cybersecurity and fraud risks. This was a meeting that was postponed earlier because I think that was the one, was it when the, what's that? What? Oh, this was canceled previously at this meeting.
Today?
No, next month.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just rescheduling because the CEO of the Health Authority wasn't available at that time, so, yeah. Okay? So, I guess that brings everything to a close. I'm going to have to start allowing a few more minutes in that second round of questioning, I guess, but you never know how long the closing remarks are going to be, so. Ms. Roberts.
Sorry, just before we break up, because we have a couple of minutes, I would like to think that we might be open to scheduling an additional meeting if the follow-up report brings back several substantive issues for us to discuss, because right now we have in the past had follow-up audits that have led to multiple departments being called to discuss recommendations that are not complete. We kind of don't know until it arrives, but it's unfortunate that I find it unfortunate that that report will be released on March 24th and we don't get to see it until a month and a half later. So maybe just maybe people could think about whether they would be open to that at the April 13th meeting, having a conversation about whether we might schedule a second report in a month to hear from the Auditor General, so that we might then schedule relevant departments.
Mr. McGuire.
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay, you had your hand up before. Okay, so you're asking everybody to just consider it for discussion later at a later date, right? Okay. If there is no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.